Nancy's hands were still sticky with antiseptic when she heard the sound. Wet, labored, dying. She should have kept walking. Should have caught her train. But she didn't. And that single moment of mercy set off a chain reaction that would shatter her marriage, expose a conspiracy, and force her to choose between the monster who saved her and the husband who destroyed her. If you think you know where this goes, you're wrong. Subscribe now because the twist in Chapter 6 will leave you speechless. Drop a comment telling us. Would you save a life if you knew it would ruin yours? Her name was Nancy Dent, and this was the night she became collateral damage. The shift ended at 2:14 a.m. She was hollowed out, running on autopilot. Her scrubs smelled like iodine and industrial bleach. Her lower back screamed. All she wanted was to collapse on her couch and forget the screaming or the understaffed chaos, the way her supervisor had humiliated her in front of an intern. Again. The hospital parking lot emptied an hour ago. She tugged her worn jacket tighter against Chicago's October wind and started toward the L station. A 20-minute walk through streets that grew darker with every block. The rain had started. Not the gentle kind but the punishing cold sheets that soaked through fabric in seconds. She ducked her head and moved faster. Chicago nights were never truly quiet. Somewhere sirens wailed. A couple argued in Spanish outside a bodega. But the alley she passed, the shortcut she'd taken 100 times, felt wrong tonight. Too still. Too dark. That's when she heard it. A wet, gurgling rasp. Like someone drowning on dry land. Nancy stopped. Her breath fogged in the rain. Hello. Silence. Then another sound, shallow, desperate breathing. Every rational part of her brain screamed to keep walking. Call 911 from a safe distance. Let someone else handle it. But her hands were already moving. Already reaching for the penlight in her bag. She turned toward the dumpster. And that's when she saw him. A man slumped against the brick wall. Legs splayed, one hand pressed hard against his side. Blood pooled beneath him. Black under the broken streetlight. Rain washed it toward the gutter in thin red rivers. Jesus! Nancy dropped to her knees in the filth. Her training obliterating hesitation. Pulse thready but present. Airway clear but labored. The wound. A jagged gash along his lower ribs. Possibly a knife, definitely deep. She pressed both palms against it, feeling warm blood surge between her fingers. Stay with me, she commanded, her voice steadier than her hands. You need to stay awake. His eyes opened. Nancy's breath caught. They weren't the eyes of a dying man. They were sharp, cold, calculating. The eyes of someone who had stared down death before and refused to blink. Even now, bleeding out in a rain-soaked alley, they locked onto her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Not pleading. Not afraid. Assessing. Who did this to you? Her voice cracked despite herself. He didn't answer. He just watched her unblinking like he was memorizing her face. She fumbled for her phone with blood-slicked fingers. I'm calling an ambulance. His hand shot out and clamped around her wrist. The strength in that grip was terrifying, inhuman for someone losing this much blood. His fingers were ice-cold and immovable. Don't. His voice was gravel and smoke. Then quieter, almost a plea. Don't let me die. Not like this. Then let me call. No hospitals. His grip tightened and Nancy saw it then. The desperation beneath the command. Not fear of death. Fear of surviving to face whatever came next. If you take me there, I'm already dead. Just let me go. She should have run. Should have screamed. Should have honored the instinct clawing up her spine that told her this man was dangerous in ways the wound couldn't show. Instead, she ripped her wrist free and snapped. Shut up and let me work. She dug through her bag. The oversized tote she'd learned to pack like a field medic after too many double shifts. Gauze, surgical tape, a travel suture kit she'd stolen from the supply closet months ago. Her hands moved with mechanical precision. Clean, pack, compress, close. It wasn't sterile. It wasn't protocol. But it would keep him alive long enough to make his own bad decisions. The entire time he watched her. Not with relief. Not with gratitude. With something darker. Something that felt like recognition. Like she just confirmed something he'd suspected. It made her want to scrub her skin raw. When she finished, Nancy stood on shaking legs, her scrubs now soaked with rain and his blood. You need a real hospital. What I did buys you maybe 6 hours before infection sets in. I'll survive. He said it like prophecy, like the universe wouldn't dare take him. Nancy took a step back. Then good luck. She turned to leave, her heart hammering, her hands trembling with adrenaline she couldn't name. What's your name? Nancy stopped. Every instinct screamed at her to keep walking, to lie, to disappear into the rain and never look back. Nancy, she whispered. She would never understand why she told him the truth. The man smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. Nancy, I won't forget that. She walked away, but she could feel his gaze on her back the entire 20 blocks home. Cold, patient, and inescapable. Nancy Dent didn't know it yet, but she just saved Mark McReynolds, head of the Chicago syndicate. And Mark McReynolds never forgot a debt. Please, if you are listening, stories like this aren't just about power. They're about the choices behind it. If this one pulled you in, please subscribe and stay with the channel. More stories like this are coming. Nancy's fingers were still pruned from the last scrub down when she pushed through the ER side exit into the downpour. 2:14 a.m. The kind of hour that didn't belong to yesterday or tomorrow, just a dead space where exhausted people made mistakes. Rain hit her face like cold needles. She didn't have an umbrella, didn't have the energy to care. The L station was 20 blocks north through streets that got progressively worse with each turn. Her supervisor's voice still echoed in her skull. Maybe if you spent less time playing hero and more time following protocol, Dent, you wouldn't be drowning in debt. The woman had said it loud enough for the entire nurses' station to hear. Nancy's jaw still ached from clenching it. She moved faster, head down, her worn sneakers splashing through puddles that reflected fragmented neon. Somewhere a siren wailed. A bottle shattered against pavement. Chicago's night soundtrack. The alley shortcut appeared on her left, darker than usual, the streetlight still broken from last week. Nancy hesitated. Then her phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Working late again. Don't wait up. Of course he was. She ducked into the alley. The sound stopped her halfway through. A wet, horrible rasp that her nurse's brain immediately categorized as respiratory distress. Nancy's hand went to her penlight before conscious thought could intervene. Hello. The breathing stuttered, then continued. Labored. Failing. She found him behind the dumpster. Rain washing blood across the concrete in dark rivers. A man, mid-30s maybe, dark hair plastered to his skull, expensive suit ruined. One hand clutched his side where something had opened him up from ribs to hip. The wound was deep, ugly, professional. Nancy dropped to her knees in the filth. Training obliterated hesitation. I'm a nurse. Don't move. His eyes opened and Nancy's hands faltered. They were wrong for a dying man. Too sharp, too aware, like he was cataloging her face for later use. Not pleading. Calculating. She pressed her jacket against the wound. Blood soaked through immediately. Who did this? He didn't answer. His hand found her wrist, the grip iron-strong despite the blood loss. I'm calling an ambulance. Don't. His voice was gravel scraped over stone, then quieter, almost breaking. Don't let me die. Not like this. Not for them to find. Then let me. No hospitals. His fingers tightened until her bones ached. You take me there, I'm dead anyway. Just leave me. Nancy stared at him, at the terror beneath the command, not fear of death, but of surviving to face whoever did this. She should have run. Instead, she ripped her wrist free and snapped. Shut up and let me work. Her bag hit the wet ground. Gauze taped the suture kit she'd stolen 3 months ago. Her hands moved with mechanical precision. Pack, compress, close. Not sterile. Not protocol. But enough. He watched her the entire time. Not with gratitude. With something darker that made her skin crawl. When she finished, Nancy stood on shaking legs. You need a real hospital. This buys you maybe 6 hours. I'll survive. She turned to leave. "What's your name?" Nancy stopped. Every instinct screamed to keep walking. "Nancy," she whispered. The man smiled, cold and certain. "I won't forget that." She walked away, but she could feel his eyes on her back. Patient, dangerous, and already planning something she couldn't see coming. Nancy Dent had just saved a monster. And monsters always collected their debts. Nancy didn't think about the man in the alley for 3 days. She couldn't afford to. The air swallowed her whole. A 72-hour blur of traumas, codes, and her supervisor's escalating cruelty. Dr. Patricia Vance had made humiliation an art form. Wednesday morning, she dressed Nancy down in front of a patient's family for wasting supplies on a homeless man's infected wound. Thursday, she'd reassign Nancy's lunch break to cover for someone who didn't exist, forcing her to work 13 hours straight. Friday, Vance had smiled sweetly while announcing Nancy would be covering the holiday shifts no one wanted. "Someone's got to pay their dues," Vance had said, loud enough for the entire station to hear. "Especially someone with your financial situation." Nancy's student loan debt was supposed to be private. Supposed to be. She'd gone home Friday night, microwaved something that might have been food, and stared at the letter from the collections agency. $127,000. The number had grown teeth. Her minimum payment was 3 weeks overdue, and they were threatening wage garnishment. Marcus hadn't come home again. 3 nights this week. When she'd asked about it, he'd snapped about a project deadline and slept in the guest room. Nancy fell asleep on the couch still wearing her scrubs, too exhausted to shower. Saturday morning, her phone buzzed at 6:47 a.m. The email subject line made her sit up so fast her vision blurred. "Account update, immediate attention required." Her hands shook as she opened it. "Dear Ms. Dent, we are writing to inform you that your student loan account #4782-9361 has been paid in full as of October 14, 25. Your current balance is $0. A cashier's check in the amount of $127,483.19 was processed by our accounting department on October 13, 25. No further payment is required." Nancy read it 3 times. Then 4. Someone had paid her debt. All of it. Anonymously. Her first thought was Marcus. But Marcus had been too stressed about money to help with her last payment. Her parents were retired on a fixed income. She had no rich relatives, no forgotten inheritance. The email included a transaction number and a note to contact their office with questions. Nancy tried. She called. She emailed. Every response was the same. The payment was processed legally and completely. We cannot disclose the source per the donor's request. She sat in her kitchen staring at her phone, feeling like the walls were pressing in. Monday morning she walked into the ER expecting the same toxic routine. Patricia Vance wasn't there. "Did you hear?" Kelly from triage whispered, grabbing Nancy's arm. "Vance got promoted. Some hospital in Alaska offered her triple salary to run their trauma department. She put in her notice Friday and flew out yesterday." Nancy's coffee went cold in her hand. "Alaska, right? Who takes a job in Alaska?" Kelly laughed. "But honestly, good riddance. Maybe we'll finally get someone who's not a complete psycho." Nancy nodded, barely hearing her. Alaska. The most remote posting imaginable. And a promotion so good Vance couldn't refuse it. The debt. Vance. Both problems that had been crushing her. Gone within 72 hours. Nancy's hands started shaking. She walked to the supply closet, locked herself inside and pulled out her phone. Her call history showed the last number she dialed before finding the man in the alley. She scrolled further back, looking for anything unusual. Nothing. But when she checked her locker after her shift, there was something new inside. A burner phone. Small, cheap, prepaid. 1 contact saved in the directory. No name. Just a number. And a text message already waiting. "You saved my life. Now I'm saving yours. Don't refuse. You'll insult me." Nancy stared at the phone until her vision blurred. Then she threw it in her bag and walked out of the hospital, feeling invisible eyes watching her every step. Nancy kept the burner phone buried under tampons and old receipts at the bottom of her bag. She told herself she'd throw it away. She told herself this for 6 days straight. She never texted the number. Never called. But she checked every morning to see if new messages had arrived. They hadn't. The air felt different now. Nancy couldn't explain it. The air carried a charge like ozone before lightning. She found herself scanning faces in the waiting room, searching for sharp eyes and a killer's calm. He was never there. But on Tuesday, she was restocking the supply cabinet when Rachel from admissions poked her head in. "Hey, you remember that John Doe from last week? The one with the abdominal wound?" Nancy's hands froze on a box of gauze. "What about him?" "He checked himself out AMA this morning. Against medical advice, no insurance information, no ID, nothing. Just walked out around 4 a.m. when the night charge nurse was dealing with that multi-car pileup." Rachel shook her head. Guy was still on for antibiotics. Probably gonna die of sepsis in some alley. Nancy's throat went dry. Which room was he in? 407. Why? Just curious. She waited until Rachel left, then took the stairs to the 4th floor. Room 407 was already being prepped for the next patient. Linen stripped, surfaces wiped down with bleach. Nancy stood in the doorway, heart hammering. A housekeeper pushed past her with a cart. "You need something?" "No. Sorry." Nancy walked back downstairs, telling herself she was being paranoid. He was just another trauma case. Just another. Her locker was open. Nancy stopped dead in the hallway. She always locked it. Always. The combination lock hung open, twisted to the correct numbers as if she'd opened it herself and forgotten to close it. She approached slowly, half expecting something to jump out. Inside, everything looked normal. Her spare scrubs, her deodorant, the protein bars she kept forgetting to eat. But sitting on top of her folded jacket was something new. A small white box. Unmarked. Nancy's hand shook as she opened it. Inside was a phone. Different from the burner, this one was sleek, expensive, the kind that cost more than her monthly rent. Fully charged. One contact programmed. And a note, handwritten on heavy cardstock in sharp, precise letters. "You're wondering if you imagined it. You didn't. Room 407, bed by the window, 11 days. I could have left any time, but I wanted to make sure you were safe first. Your supervisor won't bother you again. Neither will the debt collectors. Consider it a down payment. You'll hear from me soon. Don't ignore me, Nancy. I don't like being ignored. Her breath came in short, sharp gasps. 11 days. He'd been here for 11 days, just floors above her, watching, waiting, making sure she was safe. Nancy looked at the box again and found something else. A hospital visitor's badge, expired yesterday. The photo was too blurry to make out details, but the name was typed clearly. Michael Reynolds. Not his real name. She knew that instinctively. She shoved everything back in her locker and slammed it shut, spinning the lock with trembling fingers. The hallway suddenly felt too long, too exposed. Every exit sign looked like an escape route she should have taken weeks ago. That night, Nancy sat in her empty living room. Marcus was working late again, and stared at the new phone. One message was already waiting. "You didn't throw away the first phone. That tells me everything I need to know." Her thumb hovered over the keyboard. She should block the number. Should take both phones to the police. Should do anything except what she did next. She typed, "Who are you?" The response came in seconds. "The man you saved. The man who owes you everything. The man who's going to make sure nobody ever hurts you again." Nancy dropped the phone like it burned. Outside, a car engine idled for 3 long minutes, then drove away. She didn't sleep that night. Nancy had stopped expecting Marcus home for dinner 3 weeks ago, but tonight she tried anyway. Roast chicken, the kind he used to say reminded him of his grandmother's cooking. She'd even set the table with the wedding china they never used. By 8:30 p.m. the chicken was cold. By 9:15 she'd eaten alone, scraping her fork against expensive porcelain in a silent house. By 10 o'clock, she'd given up and was loading the dishwasher when she heard his key in the lock. Marcus came in smelling like expensive cologne she hadn't bought him. His tie was loosened, his hair slightly mussed, the carefully constructed dishevelment of someone trying to look naturally exhausted. "Hey," he said, not quite meeting her eyes. "Sorry, the presentation ran late." "It's fine." Nancy dried her hands on a towel. "There's chicken in the fridge if you're hungry." "Already ate. Client dinner." He was already moving past her toward the stairs. "I'm exhausted. Gonna shower and crash." "Marcus." Her voice stopped him. "We need to talk about the visa bill." His shoulders tensed. "What about it?" "It's maxed out. Again. I thought we agreed to pay it down before charging anything else." "Work expenses. I'll get reimbursed." He still hadn't turned around. Nancy's jaw tightened. "And the transfer from our joint account? $1,500 last week." Now he turned. His expression was practiced innocence. "What transfer?" "To an account I don't recognize. It just says, external transfer on the statement." "Oh, that." Marcus rubbed his face, the picture of a man too tired to explain. "It's a short-term investment thing. Dave from work told me about it. High yield, low risk. I was going to surprise you when it paid out. You took $1,500 without telling me for a surprise investment?" "Jesus, Nancy, it's my money too." His voice sharpened. "Or did paying off your student loans make you forget we're supposed to be partners?" The words hit like a slap. Nancy's hand stilled on the towel. "Excuse me." "Nothing." Marcus was already climbing the stairs. "I'm sorry. I'm just exhausted. We'll talk about it this weekend, okay? I promise." She listened to his footsteps disappear down the hallway. The shower started running 30 seconds later. Nancy stood in the kitchen, something cold and sharp forming in her chest. She'd paid off her loans herself. Or rather, someone had paid them for her. Someone Marcus knew nothing about. She'd never told him. The relief had felt too strange, too tainted to share. And now Marcus was lying about money. Nancy walked to the small desk in the corner where they kept household files. The bank statements were supposed to be there, organized by month in the blue folder. The folder was empty. She checked the drawer, the file cabinet, the recycling bin. Gone. All of them. Her phone was in her hand before she'd consciously decided to move. She logged into their joint account, hands shaking as she scrolled through transactions. The $1,500 was there, dated last Tuesday. But as she scrolled further back, she found more. $800 2 weeks before that. $1,000 the week before that. $1,200 in September. All to the same unnamed external account. Nearly $6,000 drained quietly over 2 months. Nancy's vision blurred. She zoomed in on the most recent transaction, looking for any detail she'd missed. The timestamp showed 2:47 a.m. Marcus had made the transfer at 2:47 in the morning, when she'd been at work, when he was supposedly asleep. Upstairs, the shower shut off. Nancy closed the app and set her phone face down on the counter, her pulse hammering in her ears. When Marcus came back downstairs 20 minutes later in pajamas, hair damp, he found her sitting at the kitchen table in the dark. "You okay?" he asked. Nancy looked at him, really looked. At the new cologne, the unexplained absences, the careful way he never quite met her eyes anymore. "Fine," she said. "Just tired." He kissed the top of her head, a gesture that once meant comfort. Now it felt like something else entirely. "Get some sleep," he murmured and disappeared into the guest room. Nancy sat alone in the darkness, thinking about money that vanished in the middle of the night. And about a man who paid debts she never asked him to pay. The text came through at 11:23 p.m. on a Friday, 3 days after Nancy had confronted Marcus about the money. "Tomorrow, 9 p.m. The violet hour. Come alone. We need to talk about your husband." Nancy stared at the message until the screen went dark. She should delete it. Block the number. Tell someone, anyone, that a man she'd saved in an alley was now tracking her marriage. Instead, she texted back, How do you know about Marcus? The response was immediate. I know everything about you, Nancy. That's the problem. She didn't sleep. Couldn't. Marcus had come home around 2 in the morning, smelling like whiskey and something floral she didn't recognize. He'd kissed her forehead, a husband's muscle memory, and passed out in the guest room before she could ask where he'd been. Saturday dragged. Nancy told Marcus she was meeting Kelly for drinks. He barely looked up from his laptop. Have fun, he'd said, already typing again. The Violet Hour occupied a renovated speakeasy in Wicker Park, the kind of place with no sign, just a blue light above an unmarked door. Nancy had never been inside. Couldn't afford it. The hostess glanced at her worn jacket and hesitated. Do you have a reservation? I'm meeting someone. Name. Nancy opened her mouth, realized she didn't have one. I don't. She's with me. The voice came from behind the hostess, smooth and dark as aged whiskey. Nancy's breath caught. He looked different than he had bleeding out in the rain. The expensive suit was tailored perfectly, charcoal gray that probably cost more than her car. His hair was styled back, revealing sharp cheekbones and that same unsettling intensity. But it was his eyes that made her hands tremble. They held recognition, possession, like she was something he'd already claimed. Mark McReynolds. She'd looked him up after the second phone. Organized crime. Suspected in 14 murders. Never convicted. This way, the hostess said quickly, her demeanor transformed. Mark didn't touch Nancy, but she felt his presence like heat as he guided her through the dim lounge to a private booth in the back. Leather seats. A single candle. Enough shadows to hide anything. He waited until she sat before sliding in across from her, too close in the enclosed space. You came, he said. Not surprised. Satisfied. You mentioned my husband. Nancy kept her voice steady. What do you know about Marcus? Mark signaled to a server who appeared instantly with 2 glasses of something amber. Drink first. You'll need it. I don't want. Nancy. Her name in his mouth felt intimate, dangerous. I've had people watching you since the night you saved me. That's not a threat. That's a fact. And what they've found. He paused, studying her face. Your husband is stealing from you. I know about the transfers. It's not just transfers. Mark slid a manila envelope across the table. Marcus Dent. Real estate analyst. Married to you for 4 years. Also currently sleeping with Vanessa Chun, a paralegal at Hoffman and Cross. She's 3 months pregnant. The words hit like physical blows. Nancy's vision tunneled. You're lying. Open the envelope. Her hands moved automatically. Inside were photographs. Marcus and a woman with long dark hair, leaving a hotel, kissing in a parking garage. His hand on her barely visible baby bump. The dates were stamped in the corner. Last Tuesday. Last month. 6 weeks ago. Nancy's throat closed. That's not all. Mark's voice was gentler now, almost kind. The money he's been taking? It's not for her. It's for them, the Calabrese family. Marcus has been laundering through your clinic's pharmaceutical accounts for 18 months. That's impossible. Marcus doesn't have access. He does. Through your login credentials. The ones you keep on the notepad by your home computer. Mark leaned forward. Nancy, your husband didn't meet you by accident. The Calabrese family planted him 4 years ago because you had access to hospital pharmaceuticals and financial systems. You were a target. Everything since has been a con. Nancy couldn't breathe. The lounge spun. Why are you telling me this? Mark's expression shifted. Something hungry and protective at once. Because you saved my life when you should have let me die. 'Cause nobody gets to use you like this. Not while I'm breathing. I don't need your. Yes, you do. His hand covered hers on the table, warm and immovable. The snake in your bed is about to strike, Nancy. And when he does, you'll have one choice. Let him destroy you or let me destroy him first. Nancy looked at their hands. At the photographs. At the man who'd somehow become her dark guardian. What do you want from me? She whispered. Mark smiled, cold and certain. Nothing you're not already willing to give. Nancy spent Sunday breaking into her own marriage. Marcus had left early for another emergency meeting, kissing her cheek with practiced tenderness that now felt like a stranger's touch. The moment his car pulled away, she was moving. The guest room first. He'd been sleeping there for 6 weeks, claiming her snoring kept him awake. Nancy tore through his closet, checking pockets, lifting shoe inserts, running her hands along seams. Nothing. His dresser yielded receipts from restaurants she'd never been to, hotel key cards from business trips she couldn't verify. But no smoking gun. No proof. The home office was locked. Nancy stared at the brushed steel handle, her reflection warped and unfamiliar. She'd never questioned the lock before. Marcus worked with sensitive client data. It made sense. It made sense until it didn't. She found the spare key taped inside the hallway smoke detector, the hiding place Marcus thought was clever when they'd first moved in. Her hands shook as she unlocked the door. The office looked normal. Desk, filing cabinets, his laptop dock. But Nancy had spent 4 years as a trauma nurse learning to spot what didn't belong. And there, tucked behind the framed photo of their wedding day, was a second phone. Not a smartphone. A burner, cheap and disposable, just like the one Mark had left her. Nancy powered it on. No password. Arrogant or stupid, she couldn't decide which. The text history made her stomach turn. V baby's kicking. She knows her daddy's voice. Can't wait to meet her. Just a few more weeks. V. When are you telling her? Once the final transfer clears. Then we're gone. Nancy scrolled further back, her vision blurring. Unknown. The pharmaceutical shipment is ready. She hasn't noticed the inventory discrepancies? Nancy doesn't check that shit. Too busy playing hero in the ER. Unknown. Calabrese wants confirmation the account is clean before the big move. It's clean. I've been careful. One more transfer and we liquidate everything. Calabrese. Mark had said the name at the violet hour like a curse. Nancy's hands were numb as she opened the desk drawer. Inside was a folder labeled Property Docs. Innocuous enough. But beneath the mortgage paperwork was a second file, this one unmarked. Bank statements for an account she'd never seen. Deposits ranging from $1,500 to $8,000. All dated over the past 18 months. The balance showed $47,000. Her money. Their joint savings, the emergency fund she'd scraped together from double shifts, siphoned away in careful increments. But worse than the money was what came next. A life insurance policy. On her. $2 million taken out 7 months ago. Marcus had forged her signature on the application. She could see where he'd practiced it on a scratch piece of paper still tucked in the folder. Beneficiary Marcus Dent. Nancy stopped breathing. Below the policy was a printed email, no subject line. The wife is the liability now. Calabrese wants it handled before the feds start digging into the clinic's supply chain. Make it look like an accident. Overworked nurse, maybe sleeping pills in a bathtub. You've got 2 weeks. The sender was listed as v.chan at hoffman-cross.com. Vanessa. The pregnant mistress wasn't just the other woman. She was the handler. Nancy's vision went white at the edges. She grabbed the desk to steady herself, her nurse's training the only thing keeping her conscious. Breathe. Count to 4. Breathe out. Count to 4. They were going to kill her. Marcus, the man she'd married, the man she'd built a life with, had been planning her murder for months. Long enough to take out life insurance. Long enough to coordinate with a crime family. Long enough to make her trust him while he drained her accounts and plotted her death. The front door opened downstairs. Nancy's heart stopped. She'd been so focused on the documents she hadn't heard the car return. Nancy. Marcus's voice drifted up from the foyer. You home? She shoved everything back into the folder with shaking hands, relocked the drawer, pocketed the burner phone. The key went back in the smoke detector. Nancy. Footsteps on the stairs. She made it to the bedroom just as Marcus appeared in the hallway, holding takeout bags and wearing that easy smile she used to find comforting. There you are. Thought we could have lunch together for once. I got Thai from that place you like. Nancy looked at him, really looked, and saw a stranger wearing her husband's face. A stranger who was going to drown her in a bathtub and collect $2 million. That's sweet, she heard herself say. Let me just wash my hands. She locked herself in the bathroom and pulled out her phone. The text to Mark was 3 words. I need help. His response came before she'd even set the phone down. I'm already outside. Nancy looked out the bathroom window. A black sedan idled 3 houses down, engine running. Waiting. She splashed water on her face, erased the evidence of tears, and went downstairs to have lunch with the man who wanted her dead. Nancy set the table with the wedding china for the 2nd time in 2 weeks. Their anniversary. For years since she'd promised forever to a man who'd been counting down to her death. Marcus had insisted on cooking. Let me make it up to you, he'd said that morning, kissing her temple. I know I've been distant. Tonight it's just us. She'd smiled and agreed, the dutiful wife, while the life insurance policy burned in her mind like a brand. Mark had wanted to move sooner. Let me handle this now, he'd said through the car window that afternoon. One phone call and Marcus disappears. No. Nancy's voice had been steadier than she felt. I need to see his face when he knows I know. I need to hear him lie one more time. Mark had studied her with something like pride. You're stronger than you think. Or stupider. No. Just done being a victim. He'd handed her something small and cold. But take this anyway. Press the button if things go wrong. My men will be inside in 30 seconds. The panic button now sat in her cardigan pocket as she watched Marcus plate the pasta. He'd made carbonara, her favorite, with the prosciutto from the expensive Italian market. Playing the devoted husband one last time. Wine. He held up a bottle of Pinot Grigio. Sure. She watched him pour, noting how he filled her glass higher than his. Checking the label when he turned away, noting it was already open, the seal broken. She'd bought that bottle last month. It should still be sealed. Nancy didn't drink. She just held the glass, swirling it occasionally. Marcus raised his glass. To 4 years. And to many more. The lie was so smooth it could have been truth. They ate in horrible domesticity, Marcus chatting about his day, asking about hers. Nancy responded on autopilot, watching the clock. 8:47 p.m. Mark had said to give him until 9. At 8:52 Marcus checked his phone. Something flickered across his face, surprise, then carefully hidden alarm. Everything okay? Nancy asked. Fine. Just work stuff. He set the phone down too quickly. The doorbell rang. Marcus froze. Were you expecting someone? No. Were you? He stood, nervous energy crackling off him. I'll get it. Nancy followed him to the foyer, her hand finding the panic button in her pocket. Marcus opened the door. Vanessa Chun stood on their porch, visibly pregnant, mascara streaking her face. You said you'd tell her by now. You promised. The color drained from Marcus's face. Vanessa, what are you? Who is this? Nancy's voice was ice. Vanessa looked past Marcus, her expression crumpling. You're Nancy. Oh God, you don't know, do you? He said he was going to tell you. He said, get out. Marcus's voice turned vicious. Vanessa, get the fuck out of here. Now. No. Nancy stepped forward. Stay. Please. Tell me what my husband promised you. Vanessa's hands cradled her belly. That he was leaving you. That once the money cleared we'd start over. That you didn't matter anymore. The money. Nancy's eyes never left Marcus. You mean the $47,000 you stole from our joint account? Or the $2 million life insurance policy you forged my signature on? The room went silent. Marcus's mask finally cracked. How did you? Or maybe you mean the pharmaceutical laundering operation you've been running through my hospital login for 18 months. The one for the Calabrese family. Vanessa gasped. What? Marcus, you said it was just. Shut up. Marcus turned on her and Nancy saw it then. The real man beneath the husband costume. His eyes were flat, calculating, dangerous. You stupid bitch, you weren't supposed to come here. Don't talk to her like that. Nancy's voice was steady now, powered by a fury she'd been swallowing for weeks. Marcus laughed, the sound unhinged. You're really going to play moral authority? You who's been fucking a mob boss. I haven't touched Mark McReynolds. But you want to. Marcus stepped closer, and Nancy saw murder in his eyes, saw the man who'd planned to drown her in a bathtub. You think I don't know he's been watching you? That he paid your debts? You're just as dirty as I am, Nancy. Difference is, I was smart enough to plan an exit. An exit that required my death. It was never personal. Marcus shrugged, like they were discussing grocery lists. Calabrese wanted loose ends tied up. You were a loose end. And honestly, $2 million makes widowhood very attractive. Nancy's hand tightened on the panic button. Behind Marcus, the living room window shattered. 3 men in black moved through the house like smoke, surrounding Marcus before he could scream. Mark McReynolds walked through the front door, stepping over broken glass, his eyes locked on Nancy. You pressed the button, he said softly. No. Nancy pulled her hand from her pocket, showing him. I wanted to. But I didn't need to. Mark smiled, cold, proud, possessive. No. You didn't. Nancy looked at Marcus, now on his knees with a gun to his head, and felt nothing but relief. Get him out of my house, she said. Mark's men dragged Marcus to the kitchen and zip-tied him to one of the dining chairs Nancy had picked out at IKEA 3 years ago. Vanessa had fled the moment the window shattered, her sobs echoing down the suburban street. Everyone out, Mark said quietly. His men hesitated, glancing at Marcus, then at Nancy. Mark's expression didn't change, but something in his stillness made them move. Within seconds, the house was empty except for the 3 of them. Marcus's bravado had evaporated. Blood trickled from his nose where one of Mark's men had hit him. Nancy, please. Let me explain. Explain what? Nancy's voice was surgical in its precision. That our entire marriage was a setup? That you were supposed to kill me in 2 weeks? That part wasn't clear enough. The Calabrese family would have killed Vanessa if I didn't. Don't. Nancy stepped closer and Marcus flinched. Don't you dare make yourself the victim. Mark leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching. Waiting. This was her moment and he knew it. Nancy reached for her purse on the table and pulled out the small leather case she always carried. Her personal medical kit. Marcus's eyes widened as she unzipped it, revealing scalpels, suture needles, surgical scissors. What are you doing? I'm a nurse, Marcus. I fix things. Nancy selected a scalpel, the blade catching the kitchen light. But I also know exactly where to cut to make someone suffer without killing them. Femoral artery, brachial artery, the spaces between ribs where a blade slides in clean. Marcus's breathing turned ragged. You're not a killer. No. I'm not. Nancy crouched in front of him, the scalpel loose in her hand. But you made me complicit in your crimes. You used my login, my access, my name to launder money for the mob. When the FBI comes, and they will, I'm the one with motive and means. You set me up to take the fall. I can fix it. I can tell them it was all me. You're going to die tonight, Marcus. Nancy's voice was flat, clinical. The only question is whether I'm the one holding the blade when it happens. She pressed the scalpel against his throat, just hard enough to dimple the skin without breaking it. Marcus went absolutely still. For years, Nancy whispered. For years of pretending to love me while you planned my murder. Did you ever feel anything? Even once? Nancy, don't lie to me again. Her hand trembled but the blade didn't waver. You don't get to lie anymore. No. Marcus's voice cracked. I didn't. You were a job. But Vanessa, she's real. The baby's real. Please just let me go to them. Nancy's vision blurred. She'd known the answer but hearing it still felt like drowning. Mark's hand appeared on her shoulder, warm and steady. Nancy. She looked up at him, the scalpel still pressed to Marcus's throat. You're not him, Mark said quietly. You don't have to do this. He deserves it. Yes. He does. Mark's thumb brushed her shoulder blade. But you're not a killer. You're a healer. That's who you are. Even when the world tries to make you something else. Nancy's hand shook. The scalpel drew a thin line of blood. Marcus whimpered. She could do it. One clean cut just like she'd been trained. Sever the carotid, step back. Watch him bleed out on her kitchen floor. Payment for every lie, every manipulation. Every moment he'd made her feel worthless. But Nancy Dent wasn't Marcus. She wasn't Mark McReynolds either. She was something else entirely, something stronger than revenge. Nancy pulled the blade away and stood. Get him out of here. Mark studied her face, then nodded. He pulled out his phone and typed a single message. 30 seconds later, his men returned. The Calabrese family? Mark asked them. Already aware he's been compromised. They've revoked his protection. Mark smiled, cold and final. Then take him to the river. Make sure it looks like the Calabrese family's handiwork. Send a message that using my people has consequences. Nancy watched them drag Marcus out the side door. His pleas dissolving into the October night. She should feel something, guilt, horror, satisfaction. Instead, she felt nothing but exhausted relief. Mark handed her a towel. Nancy looked down and realized her hands were covered in antiseptic and Marcus's blood. The two fluids indistinguishable. The FBI will investigate, she said numbly. No. They won't. Marcus Dent disappeared owing money to dangerous people. His pregnant mistress will confirm he was planning to run. The paper trail leads to the Calabrese family. Not to you. Mark cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. You're clean, Nancy. I made sure of it. Why? The word broke on her tongue. Why do you care this much? Mark's expression softened in a way that should have been impossible for a man like him. Because you saved me when I asked you to let me die. Because you're the only person in 10 years who's seen me bleeding and broken and didn't walk away. His thumb traced her cheekbone. Because you're mine now. And I protect what's mine. Nancy should have been terrified. Should have run. Instead, she leaned into his touch and let herself break. The estate sat 30 miles outside Chicago, hidden behind iron gates and old-growth trees that had witnessed a century of secrets. Nancy drove herself. Mark had offered to send a car, but she'd refused. If she was going to walk into the monster's lair, she'd do it on her own terms. The guards at the gate waved her through without question. They knew who she was. Everyone in Mark's world knew who she was now. The house was nothing like she'd imagined. No cold marble or ostentatious wealth. Instead, it was warm, exposed brick, leather furniture worn soft with age, bookshelves that actually looked red. A home, not a fortress. Mark met her in the foyer, dressed in dark slacks and a white shirt rolled to the elbows. Casual. Human. It made him more dangerous somehow. You came, he said. You knew I would. Hoped. Not knew. He gestured toward a study off the main hall. We should talk. Nancy followed him into a room lined with books and shadows. A fire crackled in the hearth despite the mild evening. Mark poured 2 glasses of whiskey and handed her one. She didn't drink. Just held it like a prop. They found Marcus this morning. Washed up near the Riverwalk. Execution style, the news said. Calabrese family signature. Did they? Mark's tone gave nothing away. The FBI came to my house. Asked about his ties to organized crime, whether I knew about the money laundering. Nancy met his eyes. I told them I was as much a victim as anyone. That Marcus kept me in the dark about everything. And they believed you? Why wouldn't they? I'm a trauma nurse who worked 60-hour weeks while her husband destroyed her life. I'm sympathetic. Her voice hardened. You made me sympathetic. Mark sipped his whiskey. You're angry. I'm realistic. Nancy set her glass down on his desk untouched. You orchestrated everything from the moment I saved you. My debt disappearing, Vance's transfer, probably even Vanessa showing up at my house at exactly the right moment. You've been pulling strings for weeks. Yes. The honesty surprised her. No deflection, no excuses. Why? Nancy asked. Because you're extraordinary. Mark moved closer, and Nancy forced herself not to step back. You saved a dying man in an alley when any sane person would have walked away. You worked 3 jobs to pay off debt you'd earned helping people. You stayed loyal to a husband who was planning your murder. He stopped inches from her, close enough that she could smell cedar and smoke. The world takes advantage of people like you, Nancy. I wanted to give you the power to take something back. By making me complicit in murder? By giving you a choice. Mark's eyes held hers. You could have walked away at any point. Blocked my number, reported me to the FBI, disappeared. But you didn't. Because some part of you wanted this. Wanted to stop being the victim. Nancy's hands trembled. I'm not like you. No. You're better. Mark cupped her face and Nancy's breath caught. I'm a monster who kills for money and power. You're someone who kills to survive. There's a difference. I didn't kill Marcus. But you wanted to. I saw it in your eyes. His thumb traced her jaw. And that wanting doesn't make you evil, Nancy. It makes you human. Nancy pulled away, pacing to the window. The estate grounds stretched into darkness, manicured and perfect and hiding God knows what beneath the surface. I can't go back to my old life, she said quietly. Even if the FBI believes me. Everyone at the hospital knows Marcus was laundering money. I'll always be the nurse who was married to a criminal. Then don't go back. She turned. What? Mark leaned against his desk, arms crossed, watching her with that patient intensity. I have businesses that need legitimate fronts. Clinics, pharmacies, medical supply companies. They need someone with expertise. Someone I trust. You want me to work for you. I want you to work with me. He stood, closing the distance between them again. You keep your nursing license, run clean operations, make more money than you ever did at the hospital. And in exchange, you provide consultation when needed. Consultation. Nancy's voice was flat. You mean patching up criminals? Hiding evidence? Becoming part of your world? I mean surviving in a world that was never going to protect you anyway. Mark's expression softened. The system failed you, Nancy. Your husband failed you. I'm offering you something different, partnership. Equality. A life where you're not constantly drowning. Nancy looked at him. This beautiful, terrifying man who'd somehow become her dark savior. And if I say no? Then you walk out that door and I make sure you're protected from a distance. No strings. No obligations. His voice dropped. But you'll always wonder what would have happened if you'd been brave enough to stay. The words hung between them like a challenge. Nancy thought about her empty house, the hospital that would always whisper about her, the life she'd built that had turned to ash. She thought about Mark bleeding in an alley, whispering, "Don't let me die." About how saving him had set off this unthinkable chain of events that destroyed everything, and somehow set her free. I have conditions, Nancy said finally. Mark smiled, slow and dangerous and somehow fond. I wouldn't expect anything less. I won't kill. I won't hurt innocents. And if I ever find out you lied to me the way Marcus did, I'll hand you the scalpel myself. Mark extended his hand. Deal. Nancy stared at his outstretched palm. This was the moment. The choice that would define everything that came after. She took his hand. His fingers closed around hers, warm, steady, possessive. Deal, she whispered. Mark pulled her closer, until they were breathing the same air. You saved my life in that alley, Nancy Dent. Now let me save yours. I don't need saving. No. His forehead touched hers, intimate and terrifying. You need an equal. And so do I. Nancy closed her eyes and let herself fall into the unthinkable. Into partnership with the monster. Into a life built on blood and mercy. Into the dark freedom of finally being seen. The fire crackled. The night pressed against the windows. And Nancy Dent, trauma nurse and accidental mob queen, stepped fully into the shadows she'd been dancing with since that rain-soaked night. Not as a victim. Not as a prize. But as something far more dangerous. A woman who'd learned that sometimes monsters were the only ones honest enough to tell you the truth. The chain of events that began with "Don't Let Me Die" had led her here. And Nancy wouldn't have it any other way. If you enjoyed this story and felt the tension, please consider subscribing. It really helps the channel. And more Mafia stories are on the way.